it's time for the Granada Forum Radio Show. Right now, live on air with your host, Granada Wendy.
Hey, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Granada Forum Radio program. Today is July 6th, and we do got a nice show. Our first hour will be open lines and conversation with the round table. Lots of things to discuss. And then the second hour, we're doing an update with Mr. Peter about the thing that's in Orange County, the mural that the U.S. government is trying to get rid of. So that'll be interesting, and we'll call Peter at 8. But until then, we're going to do a round table. I'm going to do a couple minutes of announcements, but I want to thank my wonderful co-host, Mr. Nick Pearson.
Hey, hey.
And my wonderful producer, Mr. Richard Kane, who we cannot live without.
Hi there.
Thank you. So we're going to have a good show tonight. And by the way, we will have Deborah Tavares, document lady, who documents everything, and her documents and the research is absolutely phenomenal, the researcher, Deborah Tavares, next week on Friday the 13th, so that will be a barn burner, to say the least. And go to her website, www.stopthecrime.net. That's www.stopthecrime.net for Deborah Tavares. Absolutely incredible stuff coming from Deborah. As you know, she documents everything, and her documents and the research that she shows all the time on her website is just beyond words. So, Lady of the Hour will be back with us next week on Friday the 13th. There you go. I'm sure Nick's probably laughing right now going, we're always laughing about the certain dates that come up.
Well, we always get her on like Friday the 13th, and it's like she's always so full of good news. It's like, it's fitting.
This is Revolution Radio. We're the #1 commercial-free, listener-supported internet talk radio station in the world. We are located at freedomslips.com. That's freedomslips.com. You can also get us at revolution.radio. That's revolution.radio. You can hear us at revolution.radio. Besides freedomslips.com. And we are Studio A, and this is the Granada Forum radio program. By the way, we will be at the Alternative Therapies for the 46th Annual Cancer Control Convention, September 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 2018, at the Glendale Hilton Hotel in California. That's the Glendale Hilton Hotel in California. We're going to give you a website, www.cancercontrolsociety.com. That's www.cancercontrolsociety.com for all the alternative therapies. So, ladies and gentlemen, please check them out on their website because whatever cancer you may have, they've got tremendous amounts of information and hopeful answers for you at the cancercontrolsociety.com. Their phone number, by the way, is 323-663-7801. That's 323 area code 663-7801, 663-7801. And that's www.cancercontrolsociety.com. Check them out for September 1st, 2nd, and 3rd at the Glendale Hilton. We will be there live Friday night with a great show. This, I think, will be our 3rd or 4th year. Looking forward to that one. So we're very, very happy for these people at the Cancer Control Society. Also, too, we'll be filming the National Health Solutions Expo at 5855 West Century Boulevard, 90045. Phone number is 562-212-3479, 562 area code 562-212-3479, 212-3479 with the 562 area code. That's the National Health Solutions Expo that will be at the Marriott September 22nd and 23rd, 2018, 22nd, 23rd, 2018 at the LAX Marriott. So we'll be there again, live in person. So be good stuff there. Okay, a little business right there. Also, too, we're going to probably mention a few websites. Definitely Judge Report, Infowars.com. That's Infowars.com. Deborah Tavares' website, www.stopthecrime.net. www.stopthecrime.net. Also, Jordan Maxwell. Go to jordanmaxwellshow.com. That's the jordanmaxwellshow.com. We'll get Jordan back. He's doing all kinds of interesting things behind the scenes right now. Also, too, check out georgewebb.com. I'm going to bring him up, Bob, real quick. georgewebb.com. Jason Goodman for crowdsourcethetruth.com. That's crowdsourcethetruth.com. check out WorldNet Daily. They're always interesting people. WorldNetDaily.com, and Kerry Cassidy for ProjectCamelot.org, ProjectCamelot.org. J. Edward Griffin for RealityZone.com. He wrote the book The Creature from Jekyll Island on the Federal Reserve. Always remember the Federal Reserve is owned by foreign banks in foreign countries. It's not part of the U.S. government. You cannot pay off the national debt until you get rid of the Federal Reserve, which is owned by foreign banks in foreign countries, and that the IRS is a collection agency for the Federal Reserve. Something you do need to understand that. Okay, and also too, www.skywatch.org. That's www.skywatch.org, or www.geoengineeringwatch.org. That's geoengineeringwatch.org for the chemtrails, all kinds of stuff there, just like that. Dan, I've put a few websites. Nick, real quick, you want to mention someone, and then we'll get into some conversation?
No, I'm pretty good right now.
Okay, thank you so much for that one. Okay, well, let me give up. Who wants to be first tonight, guys? Bob, you want to be first? Bob? Are you listening, Bob?
Did we lose him again?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Here you are.
No, you didn't.
Yeah,
Can you hear me?
Yeah, you want to be first?
I just unmuted. Yes, I love that.
Okay, you be first. Take your time.
Hey, thank you, Wendy.
Absolutely.
Nick and Richard, thank you guys for allowing me a few minutes of their time. For me, there are three tenses. We have the past, present, and future. The most significant event or topic of the immediate past tense is what occurred nearly 17 years ago. That was the biggest domestic military attack on our great country, namely 9/11. The current Trump witch hunter, the head of the FBI, Robert Mueller, reared his ugly head in his first week on the job when he ordered the confiscation of all 85 closed-circuit video cameras that surrounded the Pentagon. Now, why did he do this? Well, probably because it was not a commercial airliner that struck the most heavily guarded military and intelligence gathering building in America, but it was a missile. In fact, the missile struck precisely where the naval accounting offices were trying to figure out where the missing $2.3 trillion went. There are so many lies that have become the common truth in America, such as kerosene could actually bring down the Twin Towers. This is a myth like what happens in America for the kids, talking about Santa Claus, the Tooth Fairy, or the Tooth Fairy, or the Easter Bunny. So 9/11 is our immediate past. Now, the present issue, which is so major that most persons are not aware of the Iran-Contra fiasco. Now, this is a Pakistani spy ring in Congress that has been operating for the past 17 years. Now, Imran Awan was just convicted 3 days ago on July 3rd. Since he pleaded guilty to bank fraud, the government cannot touch him on any other nonviolent crime that was committed prior to July 1st. That means that Anthony Weiner's trusted computer IT guy that set up the Clinton email servers, provided cracked BlackBerry phones to members of our intelligence committees. As George Webb describes Awan as the Pakistani mystery man, sending terabytes of diamonds to Pakistan. In other words, the U.S. playbook was wide open for all our enemies to see. The rat lines of guns, drugs, kids, uranium, stolen cars, and other military weapons were transported globally and traded for cash with the aid of our military. Our troops today in Afghanistan protect the opium fields so that our big pharma corporations can produce and sell morphine to hospitals around the world, and also turn them into cheap heroin, which is distributed into our inner cities. The travesty of justice that just occurred 3 days ago was too much for George Webb to take. Actually, it's not georgewebb.com, Wendy. If you just go to YouTube and type in George Webb, you will get to have access to his 3,000 videos. But now he is going one step further, exposing something that's called Task Force Orange, which goes into detail just how our elite military troops go into a foreign country, make deals with the local gangsters, and split the resources 50-50 with them. It's a win-win for the local gangsters, and the rat lines are filled, and the elite share handsomely with the profits. Now, finally, we have a future. The future tense is that of disclosure. We look forward to that. It'll expose the big lie about the existence of intelligent life throughout our universe, but also the fact that they have had contact with certain members of Earth throughout history. The bullshit, excuse my language, I don't know if that's allowed, but anyways, that our education system has been dishing out to our kids have purposely been hiding the truth and dumbing down our students. Just to wrap this up, not only will the secret space program be revealed, but major operations such as paperclip and high jump will be explained. This is going to be difficult for many, many Americans to swallow, just like our liberal, democratic, anti-Trumpers, pro-Hillary supporters are experienced today. They try and deny the truth, and perhaps they will need some extra re-educating tutoring. And I'll volunteer for that. And that's the report for tonight.
Thank you, Bob. Appreciate that.
Outstanding. Okay,
outstanding.
Thank you.
Really good.
Excellent.
Excellent.
If there's any questions,
brilliant.
I'd be glad
any
to
question?
hear any questions for anybody on the air. Or
no, I think we're all on the same page on that one.
Yeah, Carlos here. You know that...
yeah, Carlos wants to ask a question. Go ahead, Carlos.
Yeah, just Bob, I'm sure you were aware that the smuggling of drugs has been going on for a long, long time with the aid of our intelligence agencies. They were doing it way back with China through the... and they usually do it with terrorist networks, with the KMT in China. Then they did it in Vietnam, of course, in Laos and in Cambodia, Vietnam, and Iran, all these, and coming in through also through South America, and in fact, CIA, the director of CIA at the time, George Bush, which became one of our presidents, started the Medellin drug cartel along with Carlos Leder from Colombia. Started the Medellin drug cartel, and they were sending in drugs through, of course, Cuba, Mexico, all these Central American countries, into Mena, Arkansas, where President Clinton was the governor at the time. So President Clinton presided over all these drugs that were being smuggled by the CIA, and then ending up on the streets here. You know, it's just horrible stuff. You know.
But there's a lot of profits. A lot of profits for the gangsters. A lot of profits. But yeah, I agree. You're very good, Carlos. That's we could go a lot deeper too, but you've done very well. Thank you.
Yeah. Oh, Wendy, let me just say something real quick on that.
Go right ahead, Carlos. Go right ahead.
Yeah, you know, I did a little bit of. I've been doing research on illegal immigration for a long time, but recently I started. I was questioning where all these kids from Central America, you know how they've been smuggled here the last few years. We hear in the news of thousands of kids coming in through Central America without their parents. Well, I did some digging, and they're being sponsored by a group called Sin Fronteras, which in Spanish means without borders. And the Sin Fronteras group, as we suspected, or I suspected, is being funded by George Soros' Open Society. Okay? George Soros' Open Society is an Illuminati agent answering to the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers, who's seeking, of course, they're seeking a one-world government. But this Sin Fronteras group is funding the transfer of all these kids in here, but then it becomes a big business because once they're here, they're putting facilities where big corporations are making lots of money off the holding of these kids in these facilities. Corporation, I think GEO is making lots of money, and they're expanding, so it's becoming a big, booming business. This illegal immigration stuff, it's a big, booming business. So even though the Trump administration and the Obama administration talk tough on illegal immigration. The actions speak louder than words. The actions, the result is different. They're bringing in more and more and more because it's a big business. But on top of that, it's not only a big business, it's an Illuminati agenda of bringing in so many different people and cultures from all over the world to be blended into one. Remember the model from the Illuminati, out of many, one. So they're going to create one race out of that's going to be a blend of everybody here. One race, but it's higher than that. It's also leading towards what we call one sex. That's why men and women are becoming more and more alike. Because out of this one race, they're going to also build one sex. And that's what we're seeing in restrooms like unisex. They're no longer separate, now they're combined. So the Illuminati is blending us all together, and it's a very, very, very sinister agenda that's taking place. And there's a lot more than meets the eye to this illegal immigration issue.
I agree with you, Carlos, on that. I agree with you.
That brings up a kind of a question. So, in those bathrooms where both men and women can use them, so instead of calling those unisex bathrooms, should we be calling those bisexual bathrooms?
Well, I don't know if that's really the intention of well, it may be that, because just look at the Illuminati's. Illuminati was the Knights Templars were the Illuminati of the time way back then, and their favorite image was what? Baphomet. People, have you guys heard about Baphomet? Baphomet is the picture of that one creature with both male and female organs and horns. Any of you familiar with that? Hello?
Yeah. I'm familiar with it.
We're listening.
Yeah. Well, that's sort of the picture of where the Illuminati wants to go to. Blending the sexes, combining everything into one, we will become a one-sex race.
Well, also, if you want to get back to the immigration thing, I wonder how many people realize that back in the 70s, right after the Vietnam War ended, that Jerry Brown and the Democrats were actually refusing immigrants from Vietnam. They were turning them away because they were coming out of a communist country and they did not want communism anymore. So Jerry Brown and the Democrats were turning them away at the border. I mean,
well, that's sort of unusual because
no, that's not unusual. It actually goes right along with the agenda. I'm going to say Jerry Brown because he's the governor of California pushing the sanctuary state now. But back in the 70s, during when the Vietnamese were coming over to the United States, the Democrats did not want them here because they were not going to vote for the socialist/communist agenda because they were coming out of it and they know what happens when you implement it. So they don't want them. They did not want them to come here and start voting in favor of the Constitution or conservatism as they were coming over, which is probably why they didn't want some of those Eastern Bloc refugees. I can't say that as a fact, but I'm pretty sure that they wouldn't want any of them either. But they know for a fact that a lot of people coming up from south of the border, regardless of where on the planet they come from, are not going to be voting in favor of the Constitution or conservative. They're going to be voting for the liberal socialist agenda because they're constantly being promised free stuff, and that's all they're looking for. Plus,
well, you're right about that. They were pretty selective because of the point you just made. You're right about that.
Yeah.
But in general, the Democrats have been involved in the overall illegal immigration issue. They've sponsored it, to a great degree. You started off with Kennedy, Ted Kennedy back in the '64, and Jacob Javits. They were the ones that really started the onslaught of illegal immigration in here in 1964. When Jacob Javits made a statement.
When they reinterpreted the 14th Amendment to mean something other than what it really was there for, the Democrats especially, then it opened up the floodgates because all of a sudden anybody born here is now automatically a citizen, and that's not what the 14th Amendment was about. 14th Amendment was about granting full-on citizenship to the people who were previously slaves in America. That was it. That was the scope of its intent. But like everything else, because the Democrats have this mentally deficient idea of looking at the Constitution and amendments as a living, breathing document that can be interpreted any way we want at any given time, they decided to say that, hey, anybody comes here and has a baby is automatically that baby is automatically an American citizen, and you can start collecting benefits. And we have been being drained from multiple sources, but this is just one of the bigger drains on our economy, and which is another reason you got a bunch of people flocking here. When the Democrats interpreted immigration laws also to say that, hey, guess what? You can come here, and if you have a kid with you, you can come into America, and you won't be separated. But they were separating the kids anyway. But what that did, it increased the amount of trafficking that went on, human trafficking. They would bring the kids up on human trafficking caravans, and they would bring them up into the United States, and the kids would come into America, bang, start sending money back to us. So they were flooding. That was just another way for the cartels to start a human trafficking scheme.
Well, this is all part of globalism, which is globalism is synonymous really with world government, where you bring everybody in from all different cultures, races, and they use most of these people as cheap labor for the Illuminati corporations. But then again, you use them to increase government expenditures, which is beneficial to the Illuminati bankers. The more the government spends, the more money they make. And of course, they use them also to impose the Hegelian dialectic, which is pitting one group against the other. Because all these illegals come in here, and of course that antagonizes many different factions who are not given the benefits that the illegals are given. So it's one big free-for-all chaotic situation. It's all part of the Hegelian dialectic, which has been the favorite formula for the Illuminati that they've been using for the last 200 or 300 years to pit one group of people against the other and create wars, create mayhem, and they live up the faster up conflict.
Yes.
They profit from it greatly.
Yes. There's one thing I wanted to add to what you gentlemen have said, and you've been dialoguing exceedingly well. According to Alex Jones, now I have not been able to confirm this, so this is directly from Alex Jones about 2 weeks ago, just after our First Lady visited the facility along the border in Texas. It was reported that 82% of all the children at that facility were orphans, meaning they did not have any parents at all. Not meaning that they did not have a father, but did not have a mother or a father. And how can you separate or reunite 83% of the children who basically already have no parents? It's a tragic situation. But if indeed that is true, the news media has not picked up on that at all. And of course they don't want to, because they want to defame Trump even more than they have already. Yeah. Okay, I'll say some other things later on, but gentlemen, continue.
Well, John, you made a very good point, but you remember that these kids, most of them don't have parents. They might be used for multiple purposes. Remember, they might be sold to the Illuminati pedophiles back in England, or to the pedophiles in our government. But
yes,
some of them may be also assassinated and their organ sale. Remember that organ selling is a big business also, which is not being mentioned much. And of course, they can also be used for the Illuminati satanic rituals. So,
yes.
It's convenient for them, for these kids not to have any parents. And, I talked to that guy, remember that outfit I named Sin Fronteras, that's bringing all these kids in? And I talked to the leader in Mexico, some guy named Vega, I believe. And I asked them about the kids. They said, oh, they're all united with their parents. That was a blatant lie. And you just said it. 82% don't have any parents. Yet this guy was portraying them as being secure, saying that they were all going to be mostly united with their parents, which you and I and everybody knows it's a blatant lie.
Yes.
And so this illegal immigration, if we look at it, it's never going to end. It's beneficial to our government, beneficial to the corporations, beneficial to the Illuminati. And that's why you see Europe flooded also with so many illegal immigrations. Europe is not the same country that I visited back in 2001 and also in 1967, 1968 when I was there in the military. It's a totally different world over there. It's almost becoming a third world, basically. And it's not really
not basically, it pretty much is. And the thing is that over there, the migrants that are coming through, they're not actually illegal because the EU is telling all the countries that you are taking them, and it's starting to build up a rebellion in some of the countries over there. Italy's pushing back. Sweden is starting to push back a little bit. The people of England are starting to push back. Poland has always been pushing back, and this could really bring the EU to a close, because if everybody's going to be told, hey, you're going to accept all these people in your country that are not going to assimilate, they're not going to respect your laws or your culture, and they're going to start demanding that you assimilate to them, I think the people of those countries are going to take that a little bit harsh, and they are going to push back, and eventually it's going to turn around where they're probably not even going to go after the people coming in the country. They're just going to go after their elected leaders, because they're the ones who are pushing it. All the people in Brussels at the EU headquarters are telling all the other countries, it's like, you have no choice, you have no say, you are taking these people into your country. And Italy's finally started turning boats full of refugees back. It's like, go ahead and tip over. We don't care. You're not coming in the country because all you're doing is causing problems. That's it. England is a nightmare. Look what they did to Tommy Robinson for pointing it out. He's now spending 13 months in jail.
Also, too, the country of Hungary has refused to take any refugees. They're not taking anybody.
Yeah.
They're done.
Yeah,
they're not taking anybody. They're not taking a chance.
They're getting tired. They're getting tired of it because it's doing nothing but causing problems in the country. And the people who are running the EU, of course, under the guidance of George Soros and the Rothschilds and so on, they're just being the leaders of the country. Angela Merkel, she's finding herself in hot water. She may not get reelected again in Germany unless they rig the election, which they probably will. So the EU has turned into a gigantic mess, and it was supposed to be a big experiment for the globalists who are carving this world up into these sections. The United States was supposed to merge into the North American Union, Mexico, U.S., and Canada. Well, that didn't happen, and they got bent out of shape about it. But the EU did merge into this gigantic financial conglomerate, and Britain so far is the only one that has broken away from it in a vote, but they still haven't quite got out of there. And immediately the EU heads and the leaders of the other countries scream that the whole world is going to fall apart. Why? What was there before the EU? A whole bunch of separate countries, and that didn't seem to be having any problems. So why should they now? But
what I'm afraid of is that all these countries the problem is going to get so rampant that all these countries are going to go have a civil war, which is beneficial to the Illuminati.
They might.
Remember, they thrive on chaos.
Well, they just might.
What's that?
They just might. I mean, look at what's happening within their own countries.
Yeah, and that, of course, that'll give the justification for the Illuminati to impose more surveillance, more police, to increase and propagate the police state. It's a perfect formula that works out for them. They want the chaos. And so they're flooding everybody in and mixing them with everybody else, and there's nothing but antagonisms and conflicts going on. It's beneficial to the Illuminati But one other point I wanted to make is that, for instance, here in Central America, the gangs that were apparently part of organized crime and are killing a lot of people over there, and therefore stirring up the influx of illegal aliens into our countries here and being accepted because a lot of people are being targeted by the crime spree produced by these gangs over there. These gangs were sent out of here by the FBI a few years back, a lot of them. And I venture to say that once they got over there, the CIA got involved, as they usually do, and started promoting and enticing these gangs into committing all these crimes. So you see, our government, whether we like it or not, is really to a great degree responsible for the chaos and the mayhem in those countries through our intelligence networks creating strife over there and then causing the influx of illegal aliens into our country, but also to the promotion of wars like they did with El Salvador, where a CIA was over there, propagating the war in El Salvador, causing a lot of people to come here. But on top of that, you also got the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank, which are affiliated with the U.S. Treasury, that impose predatory loans on a lot of these foreign countries, Central America, and they're knowing quite well that they're not going to be able to pay them. And when they cannot be able to pay, then the payoff is, will you promote the crime? We want your cheap labor over here, and you also sell us your industries, your natural resources. So it's a one big game.
Yeah.
For profit for the Illuminati and our government. Of course, it's an agent for that. I'm sorry to say that, but it is.
Yeah, and any of those smaller countries that have the resources that somebody wants, if they refuse to take the loan, and play ball along with them, there's a step process that was spelled out in Diary of an Economic Hitman. It's like they go over and they offer the loan. The guy says no. Well, what's the first thing they do? They start harassing the country. The guy still says no. Well, then they try to take out the leader of the country. If that doesn't work, well, then they immediately start the propaganda machine going like, hey, guess what? El Salvador is the biggest threat to the United States that there ever was. We have to do something about this. And before they attack us with whatever products that they serve, that they produce in El Salvador or Guatemala, wherever. It's like they make these tiny countries to be these gigantic monsters that we're supposed to be afraid of. And once the propaganda machine has been built up, they create a false flag, and then they send our military over there to stomp them into the ground. And if they do take the loan, the loan never goes to where it's supposed to go. It always goes to some corrupt officials and maybe gets spread out, and some big production machinery gets built, and they're selling their product, their whatever their national product is, and suddenly they find that they can't pay those loans back because they're not selling enough of it, and then the international bankers move in and say, okay, I tell you what, you defaulted on your loan, now you're going to sell us all your goods and services dirt cheap because we want them, and that's how they take them over. One way is they give them the loan. The other way is they go in and they take out the leadership of the country and just take it. And it really leads up to like, why are we going after Syria? What is there that somebody else wants? And quite frankly, I'm tired of the U.S. being used as the muscle to take over all these countries. It's like, Smedley Butler wrote about it in his book War is a Racket.
Right.
He had to convince himself during his term in the military that he was in there doing his job and fighting for the rights of Americans. And afterwards, when he got out, he had to come to the realization that he was being used as high-powered muscle for corporations around the world. Every time some country didn't want to play ball, and over a period of time, they finally sent him in and stomped him into the ground. And okay, they're going to play ball now.
Now, there's another factor in Central America that may be overlooked a little bit, and that's the Ortega regime in Nicaragua, which has lasted now for 40 years, and very few Americans know anything about it, why it's a little bit different than El Salvador or Honduras or Guatemala. but it was tied in with Grenada back in 1983 as the clandestine second missile crisis with the former Soviet Union. And if you go on the internet, you can find an airport called El Huete, Huete, which in German would be pronounced heute, which means today or now. And during the year 1982, German Stasi and former Soviet Spetsnaz forces were brought in to pacify that area, which meant killing multitudes of peasant farmers, their families, in that area north of Lake Managua, the smaller lake. Lake Nicaragua is the largest lake to the south, and clearing that area and beginning the construction of a 10,000-meter runway or airfield. And simultaneously over on Grenada, the island of Grenada, which was only famous for nutmeg and tourism, which was made kind of famous with Clint Eastwood's film Heartbreak Ridge, which was the invasion supposedly to rescue American students on that island when a Marxist regime was still in power. But what people don't realize at that time, Nick and friends, I'm just, Carlos, I'm sorry, I just was blanking.
Wendy?
And
yeah, I'm
Wendy.
listening. I'm listening.
Wendy would be the
I'm just giving you guys a chance and opportunity to speak because sometimes when Deborah's on, we can't hardly, we're just listening. So I'm giving you guys an opportunity to speak.
I tried to tell John the name you forgot was Wendy.
Okay. Well, what I'm trying to say is, during this time period, the Soviets had constructed what is still today the largest air transport in the world. And unlike the earlier crisis in Cuba, by then they had developed a technology whereby they had developed a completely integrated missile launch site for an intermediate range missile. So on this giant transport, they could carry the control center, the launch pad, the missile, and the nuclear warhead, which had a range of approximately 3,200 nautical miles. Well enough to cover all of the United States. And the problem was that this particular giant air transport did not have the range to fly directly to Nicaragua. It needed to have a stopover someplace several hundred miles less of Nicaragua so that it could make it all the way to that final landing site. And so on Grenada, they were building that 9,000-meter airfield as that stopover for the refueling so that the plane could continue on to Nicaragua. And it wasn't just one plane. There would be several of these transports. And once they got to this location, then the launching would occur. And this is all clandestine. The Reagan administration never publicized it at all, but it was, for all practical purposes, just as serious as the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962. And Daniel Ortega is still in power. That airstrip still exists. I've seen photographs of Vladimir Putin visiting it, and in all probability, if any missiles are able to be smuggled out of North Korea, guess where they might go. But I just want to add that factor. And within the last few years in Nicaragua, people are getting the message and leaving as quickly as they can because there is no future. These are Central Americans who are very anti-communist, who would not be supported by the Obama administration, and unfortunately, I don't think the Trump administration is fully aware of these people and their needs, and that's another factor that needs to be considered, just like what's going on in Venezuela, which is actually in northern South America, where possible missile sites might be deployed in the not-too-distant future. So there's a lot of possibilities that we have to keep our eyes on regarding Central America. And I wish we could just keep our noses out of it, but when those missiles are pointed at your nation's heartland, you have to wake up. Yeah.
Well, you know, John, another, thanks a lot for mentioning that, but continuing on with the topic of Central America, another way by which the Illuminati creates havoc and mayhem in those countries is by the disguised technology such as HARP. It goes out there and creates hurricanes and torrential downpours like they did with the Hurricane Mitch in Central America in the 1980s that devastated Honduras, Guatemala, El Salvador, Nicaragua. It devastated those areas. And in the same week that it happened, the International Monetary Fund was already made contracts to refurbish and revamp the area, of course, using their allied corporations such as Westinghouse and General Electric and Bechtel. How convenient. You tell me. So they're using this clandestine technology, which creates all these climatic disturbances, and it's a perfect disguise because who's going to suspect that something that's called a natural event, such as a hurricane that hit it, could be caused by technology such as HARP in Alaska. So they got a perfect way of committing further crimes. And of course, the end result is more illegal immigration into the United States and more devastation to those countries. So it's just a big all around business for the Illuminati.
Yes,
they're triumphing, and it's not going to end. That's the sad part about it.
By the way, Carlos, did you happen to hear what was said by our good friend who comes on late at night, Alex Jones, regarding the new president of Mexico, who allegedly made a statement to the Mexican people? He said, "Leave your villages, your towns, your hamlets, and go north to the United States."
States, right? That's right, John. Yeah, this was said, and this is very bad that this was said, and mainstream media just doesn't want to cover it. And also, too, I did hear from a very well-known person that Nicaragua's Guatemala's economy is crashing right now, guys. Did you know that? That Guatemala's economy is crashing right now. So I think they're doing big
I've heard a few things.
Go ahead, Carlos.
Yeah, I've heard comments about that. Yeah. But you look at all these leaders of all these countries, like López Obrador. You look at Chavez. You look at Maduro in Venezuela. You look at Fidel Castro. You know what they have in common? They're all Freemasons. I have seen López Obrador in Mexico do the Freemasonic Osiris sign. Fidel Castro was a Jesuit. The Jesuits are a branch of a Masonic branch. He was a Jesuit. Maduro, also in Venezuela, is a Freemason. So is his, they run all sides. So is his opponent, Carriles, I believe his name is Carriles. His opponent in Venezuela is a perpetual opponent, is also a Freemason. Daniel Ortega, of course, and also product of the Jesuit upbringing over in Nicaragua, everywhere you look, you see the Freemasons involved. And it's, of course, and even our government, you see the Freemasons everywhere. Bill Clinton was a Freemason. Coming out of the Jesuit University, Georgetown. Trump also went to a Jesuit university. On and on. Franklin Delano Roosevelt was a 33rd degree Mason.
Yes.
So was our president who did the bombing in Hiroshima. What's his name?
Harry Truman.
Forget his name. Harry Truman, another Freemason. So Freemasonry is commonplace and prevalent within all these different leaders in all countries, and they all espouse the same beautiful talk. Oh, we're going to bring our country out of misery, just like Lopez Obrador is saying in Mexico now. The things are not going to improve any because they're not meant to improve. They're controlled by the Illuminati, and the agenda, of course, is to perpetuate the misery in all these countries, so that we can be so that the people can be more easily controlled, and that is very sad. How are we going to get away from this? I don't know. It's just people learning bit by bit, I guess, what's going on. But a forum like this, of course, is very beneficial. And so it's just that this Illuminati problem is so pervasive. I don't know. Anybody have any ideas how to really set back, give the Illuminati some setbacks? Does talk radio, does it do much good, really? I mean, how effective are we? Programs like Clyde Lewis, George Norris, how effective are they? That's my big question.
Well, I don't think that those two programs that you just alluded to are that effective at all. In fact, I think they're rather weak and counterproductive. But there's a few substantial programs whose names I can't think of at the moment who have been very helpful. I think getting out information, Carlos, like you've been doing most of your adult life now, is very beneficial. You should really receive an award or medal for all of the times that you've gone on talk radio programs throughout America to try to inform people and get them to think, because alternative radio seems to be the only means whereby people are going to get even a clue as to what is really happening. They're not going to get it from their newspaper or certainly the TV news at 10 o'clock or 5, whatever time they watch the
or any of the talking heads from any of the major news networks that feed you bull all day long, especially Sunday mornings.
Oh,
CNN 24/7, MSNBC 24/7. You're never going to get a real anything from them. No real news from any of them. They're just going to give you the opposing point of view from one side, and then you got the other side like Fox and a few others that they're going to give you their opposing point of view to them, and they're going to keep counterpointing each other. But when you actually sit down and ask them, okay, guys keep pointing out all these problems. How do you fix it? What's your solution? You're not going to get an answer. I met with a candidate for Senate here in Wisconsin at one of his campaign stops, and he gave a very nice speech that here's some problems and something must be done about it, and I'm the guy to do it, and damn it, I'm going to do something about it. I'm going to write some legislation, and I'm going to do something about it. And it's like, okay, well, you keep talking about it, and you keep telling us you're going to do something about it. What is your plan? What do you actually plan to do about it? Writing legislation as a freshman politician in Washington, D.C., that's going to go nowhere fast, because
right.
the swamp is way too entrenched for something like that.
But
so what is your real plan to do anything about it? There's no answer for it, not from these guys.
Right, but I think if I may just say this, the answer is basically people like Carlos and you and Wendy, who are willing to take the time to find out what is going on and communicating. Because I'll tell you,
Well,
when you get out the word to enough people, it doesn't have to be a whole lot of people. Maybe it's only 1 or 2 or 3% of the entire adult population. But if you're able to get the word out to even a smaller percentage than that, that is going to halt and draw back or cause the Illuminati to postpone, and in some cases postpone indefinitely, some of their plans to destroy this nation. They are basically cowards. They basically panic very easily. They are actually more vulnerable than we are. They don't have the stamina or the fortitude that we do. All they do is have many advantages that we do not have.
Yeah, money being the big one.
Yeah, but what I'm trying to say is, in the past, when I was a talk show host several years ago, not just my program, but we had some other programs that were really making headway against the Illuminati, and we postponed indefinitely part of their timetable for at least a decade. I'm certain of here in the United States. But unfortunately, all I have access to now is basically writing my articles and putting them on the internet. And I don't even have a blog right now. But if people want to contact me at soundoffwithjohnwspring.com.
Right.
I'm sorry.
Well,
soundoffwithjohnwspring@outlook.com. I'll be glad to add them to my list. But
getting information out there is one thing. That's just gathering intelligence, and us and all the other alternative media sites and radio shows that are out there. They're basically giving people intelligence, as it comes, or showing them what happened in the past and relating it to what's going on now. A lot of people are not going to accept it because they've not been brought up to believe in any of it through the indoctrination centers known as public education.
Yes.
But so that's only part of it. The other aspect of it is what are you going to do with that intelligence? Okay, now that you got it, now that we've given it out there, what's going to be done about it? There's got to be a plan in place that you and a bunch of other people have got to come up with and get that plan, formulate that plan, and act on it. That's where a lot of people drop the ball. That's where I watched the Liberty Movement in Los Angeles drop the ball. They all got into the Republican Party in Los Angeles, and everybody thought, okay, this is great, we're going to take it over. We wound up with about a third of the seats and the vice chair. We didn't get the chairmanship, and all of a sudden they all just went, oh, that's it, we lost, and they walked away. So you can't have people like that doing anything because nothing is ever going to get done.
Right.
So you
do
got
to have more than a baseball or soccer mentality.
Yeah, you got to have a plan of attack. You got to follow through with it. And you got to get people on board who are going to follow through with you, because you're not going to do this alone. No, everybody might be under the impression, I can't do anything by myself. No kidding, you can't do anything by yourself. Get a bunch of people together and start and form organizations that are going to act on things. Don't go through the political parties. I went that route. That's going to go nowhere, because as soon as there's a lot of money involved and you're not on the side of that money, you're going to get stomped. You're going to get washed out. It's just the way it's going to be. So get an organization, start forming your own organizations and getting your guys into office if that's what you want to do, and start forcing the issues back into the constitutional side of everything. And you got a problem with immigration, go right back to the Constitution. What did the Constitution say about it? That's how you're going to fight their agenda, at least here in the United States. As far as a lot of these other places that have been entrenched for forever, everybody's looking for a quickie solution to it too. This stuff has taken 200 years to put in place. Yeah. Okay, you're not going to solve it in 4 years. That's not going to happen. That's a very unrealistic expectation about it. It's going to take a while. These people have got a lot of money and a lot of firepower behind them, and a lot of people who are willing to go along with it for some coin, and stomp, to stomp on the Constitution of the United States. They have no qualms about it. I've seen them do it. So, all right. Anyway, we'll be right back after the break, everybody. So stay tuned.
Yes, we will with Peter. Welcome back to the Granada Forum Radio program, ladies and gentlemen. For the second hour, we have a wonderful guest. Peter is going to do an update on the mural that's taking place in Orange County from 1776 and how the U.S. government is trying to get rid of it. And Peter, are you with us?
We're grabbing them right now.
Oh, we're grabbing them right now. Okay. I wanted to say something, but we went to the break and then I wasn't able to. But I wanted to ask one question to you, Nick. I might have to ask you off air.
Hello.
Peter, this is Revolution Radio. Welcome to the program.
Hi, how are you doing today?
Good, good. I was just telling our listening audience that your 1776 mural wants you to do an update, and how is that happening, and what's going on with that?
Basically, just in a nutshell, in 1976, for the bicentennial, Corona High School students painted the bicentennial mural on the Prado Dam spillway. And it is some 6 times bigger than Mount Rushmore, so it was a pretty big project. So up to date, we want to restore it and keep it. The community wants it, everybody wants it, and the Army Corps of Engineers had plans to strip it off without any input from the community. So we got an injunction in federal court, and right now the State Historical Preservation Office is reviewing our claim that it is a historical property.
Wow. That's pretty incredible. So right now, you did get the Corps of Engineers from taking it down. So that is correct?
It's a temporary injunction while the historical review is going through. And that, since the injunction, it's been about 3 years. So first they had to bring what's called the stakeholders together. That's just all the interested parties. And then after that, it took them another year to go ahead and do their review. And then the State Historical Preservation Office did not agree with that review. So the court had to go back and do another review. And so that, instead of a few months like they were saying it would take, that took another year. So now we're at the 3rd year, and they were supposed to release it on Friday, but guess what? We got postponed for another week.
So how many times do they plan on pushing this back?
Well, actually, this time is different. The one time that it is different, because this is actually the State Board of Preservation, and they're taking this pretty seriously. They're actually, we gave them a lot of material, and they're saying, you know what, we've had 30 days so far, and they're very busy. They get a couple thousand requests a year from different interests to put properties on the historical register. So for them to say, wait a minute, we need some more time on this, this is pretty serious, and the information we've gotten to them is serious, that we're kind of happy about that, actually.
Well, here's another aspect of it. If this actually does go through and you get it onto the National Historical Register, now I wonder how that's going to affect all the monuments that have been being taken down lately. I mean, this could actually have a snowball effect at some point.
Actually, that's a very interesting point because we're learning more about this. The Parks Service kind of runs the monuments in the country that are on the National Register of Historic Places, and it's run by something called the Advisory Council on Historic Preservation in Washington. They don't have that many people who work there, a very dedicated group of people. And it's exactly what the name means, advisory board. Just because it's on the National Register doesn't mean it can't be taken down. So anything, I mean, there's properties around here. There was the GE iron plant where the original hot point iron was created back in the turn of the century in Ontario, and that building's been torn down even though it was on the National Register, so because they were widening the road. So anything can be taken down, but you need a good excuse to do it. You need to go through court to do it. And everybody's kind of like on their best behavior usually when it comes to that. So a lot of these statues, I don't know if they're on any national register, but that might be something that people could look at doing. We're kind of new to this, and a lot of this stuff hasn't been tried before. So it's a very interesting situation.
Well, I think you're doing a wonderful job, Peter, and the people in Orange County and the people with the mural of 1976. It's to be commended, and you definitely, I hate to say this, Peter, but you're probably going to write a small little book or definitely a periodical on this, because the people are going to have to, from all the stuff that you researched and all the time and hours that you guys have put in, that it's definitely going to be remembered.
I think it's for any scholarly work on the bicentennial. It's a shame nothing's been done on this. It's one of the most monumental moments in our nation's history. I mean, Gerald Ford, I think he said, we kept the faith and liberty flourished and survived. And, that's a pretty big milestone. It's not a commemorative thing like the Army Corps of Engineers is saying it is, like George Washington slept here. It's not a commemorative plaque on something, on a past event. It was a milestone in our nation's history. And for them to argue that it's not, when even the civilian staff of the Army Corps of Engineers take the pledge to uphold the Constitution, that they would actually come out and say that under their criteria it doesn't meet the historical, eligibility. That's pretty out there. Right.
Yeah, I agree.
And what we're trying to do is, even if it's on the eligibility situation, it's not on the National Register. Then you have to go ahead and submit it to the National Register. But being just eligible by itself means it's going to have some protections, because as a federal agency, the Corps is, supposed to follow certain regulations, and they really need a big excuse not to, and we're not going to give that to them.
I think it's great. Absolutely wonderful. Cool. And Peter, let me ask you something. Go ahead.
I was going to ask, so what happens if, this does get on the National Register, it has protections, it gets cleaned up, and everybody's happy about it, but what happens if they have to redesign the dam at some point?
That probably wouldn't happen for at least a half a century. And if they do, what will happen is there'll be some kind of a mitigation where all the parties would come in and they would say, how can we mitigate this so it's less intrusive? Oh, you're going to change that? Okay, we can make variances and keep as much of the original design as we can by doing this. So there are ways to do it. There are, steps to doing things like that, because that has happened with other houses. Let's say a house was on the National Register, but it had lead paint, and they had to do something because maybe it had wood rot. So they work around those things, and I think that spillway is going to be there pretty much for another 100 years at least, because they're raising the back side of it 1,000 feet away by 20 feet. Now, they also built another dam up in the foothills, and now they raised this dam. So that dam is set for a 300-year storm. So I can't imagine them doing anything besides, unless there was some kind of catastrophic failure in the concrete, which I really doubt, for at least 100 years. And I think maybe that's what the battle is about.
Well, until Southern California actually floods and has a significant amount of rain, which doesn't seem it's going to happen anytime soon, I think that dam is pretty safe.
It's definitely pretty stable. And and again, in about 10 years, the traffic on the 91 freeway is about 300,000 cars a day. In 10 years, it'll be 400,000 cars a day passing it. You can see it for a mile along the 91 freeway. In a traffic jam, you can see it for about 5 or 10 minutes on that mile. So it's a very powerful symbol of our country and of the community, and to visitors to the area, that people, this is, the daily, part of the lives of the people of the Inland Empire, and it's a landmark.
Well, I think it's thank God there are people standing up to help this save it and to preserve it, and I think because also too, if people can get behind the mural that's been there since 1776, Nick, that there's other things that we just were talking about that we can take action for, and I know that even Alex Jones is telling people, hey, become involved, take it to another level, but do it correctly and properly, but not like the other people who are doing it wrongly
and you know what?
People.
I would also like to include that when you talk to these people, if you're trying to get something done and you can get a person on a city council or somebody on the record, ask them what the process is to do what you're trying to do, because they won't volunteer that information. They'll let you wander in the desert for a couple of years first, and they'll be happy to do that. So that you remember that word, the process. Walk me through the process, and you get them on the record. So if they lie to you or withhold information, now that's on them, and you just keep a record of it.
Wow. Thank you, Peter. That's great stuff. Good stuff.
Now, it's been 4 years of trial and error.
Yeah. Well, you guys have been very successful. That's we're very grateful. Now, you haven't heard from the Corps of Engineers. That's correct, right? They've.
No, the Corps of Engineers is done with their review, so we're basically waiting for the State Historical Preservation Office, which is separate from the Army Corps of Engineers, and they are staffed with real historians. I mean, these people are actually dedicate their lives to looking at saving precious properties in our country.
Right.
And so, yeah. And so we're very happy that they are taking, because they're the ones that actually said last year that the Corps needed to go back and redo their review because it wasn't complete. So we really appreciate that they saw that and recognized it, and that they can see that we have a lot of historical facts. And also another thing too is, besides being important on the National Register, there's also the Parks and Park Service has another one that they recognize as the local significance, what it means to the local community. And it's very important to the local community. 30,000 signatures. We have all 50 states on the petition and a dozen countries, but most of them do come from Orange County, Riverside, and San Bernardino, which all annex there, right, strangely enough, right where the mural is. So they all kind of claim it for themselves, which is just great. But it's of local significance, and it means a lot to the people. And that goes a long way, too, as being a historical property of significance that's less than 50 years old.
Yeah, and given the current state of the government of California is, I'm pretty much sure it doesn't mean a hell of a lot to them. They would like to kind of forget this kind of stuff, but, since it's out of their hands, I don't know what difference it would make anyway.
That's really interesting because of the history of this mural. The people that made it actually got letters from the former governor of 1976, Jerry Brown's office, thanking them for the great job that they did on the mural back in 1976. And Alan Cranston, who was senator then, he wrote a letter. John Tunney wrote a letter saying that he has a copy of the photograph in his office in Washington. And and then all the bicentennial committees and President Ford knew about it. In fact, one of the designers of the mural met with President Ford in 1997 in Palm Springs and said what he had done. And because Ford lived in Palm Springs and went from there to Orange County all the time, he was very familiar with the mural and asked him to try and preserve it. He says, because that was the highlight of his administration, he said, was the U.S. bicentennial. And I mean, that day of the bicentennial, and like I said, somebody like Tim Burns, somebody needs to do a documentary on it, because so much is being lost, because as our historians say, because it was a backyard event, there was no scholarly work to preserve it. Like let's say a passage of a bill in Congress. There's nothing there because it was a success. So it's hard to put your hands on it. So President Ford actually said there are very few things left of the bicentennial, and please, this needs to be preserved and archived.
Yeah, I wonder what Jerry Brown's take on it now would be. I mean, back in the 70s is one thing. He's pretty much flipped on a lot of issues lately, so I wonder what his take on it now would be. And
that's
given
a good question.
Given the current state makeup of the legislature, I wonder what their take up on it would be.
Peter, have you guys heard from the legislation and the governor? Sorry, I didn't interrupt. Apologize.
No, it's really hard to go to those next levels. We've gotten U.S. congressmen involved, and we've gotten school districts and all the local cities. But when you go up that extra level, it's very difficult to get there. But the most important thing right now is actually the historians. because they're the ones that are going to decide this. It won't be decided at the governor's office. So we decided, you know what, it's in good hands. They're pretty bright over there. We've talked to them, and the things that they require are very important. And I was impressed. I'm not easily impressed. I mean, because we all know about the government, but at least this one office is pretty impressive in what they do to save properties that are meaningful in our country.
If I may interject one thought here, this year happens to be an election year, and we have incumbents and we have candidates. For example, John Cox is a gubernatorial candidate. Have you considered approaching his office as well as Newsom's office, campaign office, regarding this matter?
Actually, yes. Yeah. As a matter of fact, yes. Some people in the group are right now working on approaching John Cox, and also somebody that was interested, and somebody who actually knows their son works for Parks in California and knows Newsom, and so we're going to try and do a contact that way also, and see if we can't get both of them on board as far as this is important to the community. So, and nobody argues over it in the community. I mean, this is like there's no opposition to this. It's very strange to be on a side that has no opposition.
Yeah, that could be tough.
Now here's a kicker too, given the current state of the climate in this country. Anyway, it's okay. Say that everything went through and everything is good, and they start to restore the mural. How much you want to bet that Antifa protesters show up and try to stop people from doing it?
I
mean, can you imagine the backlash?
Yeah, that wouldn't go over well in the community, because we have artists of one extreme standing right next to combat vets of another, and I shouldn't say extreme, but of persuasion, and they're together on this issue, and it's their town, it's their mural, it belongs to them. And by the way, we will be the ones restoring it. That is something that to actually go onto federal property and do something, you need something called a non-federal sponsor, and that is a municipality. So you could use an airport or a city or a county as your non-federal sponsor, and what they do is they get the permit, and then they give you the permit to go ahead and do the work. So that's how we've discovered that this is done the correct way. So we have sponsors that are willing to pay for it all. We have paint companies that are, big companies that you recognize their names, and that are saying, hey, we want to help. We'll donate all the paint you need. From Home Depot to Behr Paints, they've been grand about this.
Wow.
Okay, then.
Amazing process.
But again, I'm looking forward to the more far-reaching implications of this should it happen, and see what this can be applied to other, like you said, monuments and murals and all other kinds of bits of Americana that have been being taken down in the recent couple of years over political correctness and all this other
I think
crap.
I think that their challenge would be, and I'm just, like I said, I'm just new to this myself, would be something that's commemorative is not necessarily historical in itself.
Right.
Let's say, a horse and rider that was put up after the fact would not be part of that historical, unlike a battlefield that would be like Gettysburg Battlefield is on the National Register, because it was actually part of the actual event itself. So it's very interesting, and it would be interesting to see how people, see this and handle it in the future as far as what is historical, what is meaningful, especially on a local level, because you can do things in the state level also. You don't have to go to the federal level. You can do it in your actual state. And, I think it behooves us to get educated on this stuff and be more a part of it, because a lot of people always thought the mural would be restored, that there was some kind of a system in place that was going to protect it. There never was. So wherever you live or wherever you are, you might want to check, if there's a landmark near you, that it's going to be staying and not a housing tract in the future. Or a Starbucks.
Or Starbucks. I don't know. I have issues with Starbucks right now. So. But well, good job getting through the bureaucracy as far as you have, considering nobody's going to help you through it who knows what they're supposed to be doing for the most part.
And they count on that.
What's that?
They count on that.
Oh yeah, of course they do. I mean, that's how it all works. They complicate everything so much that good luck finding your way through it, because we don't want to have to do extra work, so we're not helping you. So
right. I mean, when they originally announced this, they put it on their website rather than they're supposed to. From what I understand, they're required to let the local press and the local cities know their intentions. But instead, they asked for a comment period. And guess how long the comment period was? I think it was like 12 or 14 days.
Right.
Not even 30 days. I mean, and then, but here's the even better trick. The comments they were asking for was not whether the mural should be taken off the spillway, but what process is to be used to take it off the spillway.
Yeah.
So I just imagine people sitting in a room discussing how they can basically shine us on.
Well, you know what that's called? That's called the Delphi technique.
I'm not familiar with that.
Yeah, well, they have a public meeting. They'll come in there, but the conclusion that they want, the solution to whatever it is that they want, is already a foregone. It's already in place. They give you the idea that the community is actually getting some input in on it, but the whole idea is that it's always going to be steered to, okay, this is what we're going to do, so what do you think? And we're going to do it, and we're still going to do it, and we're going to do it. And anybody who comes in and starts to say, wait a minute, I don't want you to do that, it's like, well, but you don't seem to understand. We have to do it, and they steer it right back into their solution. So the people in the community will think that they actually had an input on the whole thing, when the reality of it is that this is what we're going to do, and you guys can go home and feel good about it now, but you're still going to wind up doing the things the way we want. I've seen it done personally at a meeting with the water board when they were talking about community input on doing some big water project in the San Fernando Valley, and I think I'm the only one who was asking them questions that they didn't exactly want to answer, because they weren't able to steer it to the way they wanted to. Deborah Tavares is one of the guests who's been on our show several times. She's very familiar with it. So to go into a meeting like that when the idea is like, okay, we need to discuss the process of how we're going to take it down, instead of the community coming in and say, hey, we don't want to take it down. That's not what this meeting is about. That's called the Delphi technique. They already got a foregone conclusion for the end of the meeting. They're just giving you the opportunity to come in, sit down, and put your input on it, and going, well, we tried, but the reality of it was you never had a chance at that meeting.
And the way they contact the press, they'll say there's lead in the paint, and so the press writes there's lead in the paint, but they didn't lie. There is lead in some of the paint, but what they did not say was there's not lead in the majority of the paint. So they could remove part of the paint and leave the rest for us to restore. So, but the ingenious thing of, all the press saying, oh my gosh, the lead, it's like there's more lead in an old barn in Corona there is on that entire mural, but they don't tell you that part.
No, because that way they get to use environmental regulations and say, we have to remove it. It's a hazard, and they'll send guys out there in hazmat suits and breathing apparatuses to scrape some paint off some concrete. making a big deal making more of a big deal out of it is, so everybody gets worried about it and says, wow, that's a good thing that they removed that paint.
Well, I tell you, they had all their equipment on top of the spillway to remove it. They were hours away from it when the judge found that they had not properly done an historical review of the property, which they did not do. All they did, believe it or not, was because when a federal agency wants to destroy something, they have to see if it's historical or not. And to do that, they have to do a 106 review. And so instead of doing that, they went to a review they did like 20 years earlier on the dam itself, because the dam is actually on the National Register, I believe. It is a historical property. And because it was built after the 1939 floods and it has a lot of history to it. So what they did was there was 2 sentences that mentioned the mural 20 years ago in a different review, and they used that to claim that they had already done the review. So it was, I believe the judge used the words arbitrary, capricious, and self-serving.
All right, well, he had a head on his shoulders then. But
I tell you, it makes you, really, be humbled when you see that, a piece of property like this, so many people recognize it for what it is, and they're saying, hey, this has merit, and it has to be looked at in a very serious way.
Right, and they're coming at you like it seems like 10 different ways to try to get the community on board to take it down.
Which is
another way they do it.
The Corps has a lot of might. The Corps has a lot of might, and there's a lot of people out there that are afraid of them.
They have a lot of our money.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, they get it through taxation, so they have a lot of our money. And and they do what the government bureaucracies typically do. They take your money and they use it against you for whatever reason they want instead of what you want. And you don't really have an input.
Don't care.
No, they don't. That's the whole thing. They're a bureaucracy. They can't care. They have regulations they have to go by, and they can't think outside that box.
In fact, we're going to have another new colonel in about a week, and so that we'll be on our 3rd or 4th colonel, who's the commanding officer of this. They're only in there for 2 or 3 years, and then they're cycled out. So it's very hard. What you really need, I think, anybody gets in a situation like this, if you go to the government and say, I never really believed in demonstrations because you're telling somebody else to fix it, So I think you need to come in with an answer and say, here's an answer. It makes everybody happy. Why can't we work on it? You need to tell me why we can't work on it. Put it on them, and that's kind of where you can get some success going, because once you get them on the record, they know it, and it affects them. And, it was great to be able to speak to the Corps in front of a U.S. congressman, because, they're not going to lie in front of a U.S. congressman. Not that they would, but they're going to be on, let's say, on their best behavior. And we're going to get some things done. And that's what that was all about, communicating.
Right. Yeah, that seems to be
I think a lot of times, let me finish this too. I should say this, because a lot of times people come at them with a lot of hate and anger. That will get you nowhere, because you know what? I mean, if somebody was coming at you with hate and anger, you're not going to want to really work with them. So no matter how nasty they might be in actuality to you, you just have to be respectful, or else you won't get anything. To me, it's like, is your anger more important than the thing you're trying to solve? And if it's not, then you're going to solve it.
Well, it's the quickest way to shut people up in the bureaucracy anyway, because they don't want to deal with you in the first place. So it doesn't do any good to piss off the person at the front desk, because you're never going to get any further than that.
And what's really funny is some of these people who've been pretty adversarial, because to me they're following a command decision. They kind of like us, so it's like it was kind of like revealing when. You see that, not just that, hey, yeah, we're all for you, good luck. Not that, but I mean, they actually listen to us when we talk to them. And, but at the end of the day, they've got, a command structure that they follow, and we don't agree with it, because we just don't understand why they couldn't have come out with a oh gosh, not a mission statement, but a statement basically of where they stand. I mean, so even if they stripped it bare, why aren't they saying that they'll let it be repainted? Especially since if all the public wants it and all the cities wants it, why is there a discrepancy here?
Because they're a bureaucracy. I mean, I haven't run into any government bureaucracies yet that regardless of what their own personal feelings are on an individual basis, as soon as you get them into their bureaucratic position there, they immediately they block off and they're just like, this is what the regulation. I mean, they really do. They talk in a monotone. This is what the regulation says, and this is what we must do. Yeah, but that's not what everybody else wants to do. We want to do it. Yes, but the regulation says this, and this is what we must do. Okay, let me explain it to you again. The community doesn't want that. The community wants this, and it's been here, and this is what we want, and it's ours. Yes, but the regulation says this, so this is what we must do. They don't have any answer. That's all they can. That's all they can say. And in some cases, their hands are pretty tied, and in other cases, they really just don't want to think for themselves, and it's a convenient way for them not to have to. It's kind of like they were kind of remind me, as I don't know if you've ever seen this movie called Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Came out a few years ago. The guy who played the Hobbit, he was in it. Martin Freeman. And it was so-so. I mean, it was, nobody's been able to make that movie really super well just yet. Maybe at some point they will, but they had the group of people that were running, or the group of aliens that were actually running the universe that was the bureaucracy, and the lead character he asked, well, who are they? I mean, they're kind of dicks, and he's like, well, these people, they're the bureaucrats. They don't have any imagination. They can't think for themselves, and they just kind of run things. And that's the bureaucracy. They don't think for themselves. They're not very good at what they do. But, I'm not trying to run down the Army Corps of Engineers. I mean, they have a place and everything, but when it comes to rules and regulations, they really don't like to be very flexible on them.
Right, and what's if anyone's listening that is looking at trying to do something in the future to protect the property or work with the government in any way, the most important thing to do is the simplest thing to do, and is to ask who's in charge of that project. Because you're looking at somebody right in front of you, but there's probably 3 layers above them that they're not telling you about because they want to go ahead and shield that person from you. And so you need to ask that important question: who is in charge of this project?
Right. Yeah, it's like with anything. You want to talk to your, well, like in cases that I've had personal experience, you want to talk with your representative in the state government, your assembly person. You're going to go in there, you're going to make your appointment, and you are going to talk to their staff. Because they're not going to let you talk to the assembly person. And the only thing you can say is, I'm not talking to you. I didn't make an appointment with you. I want to talk to my assembly person. And you hammer them until you get through. It's the only thing you can do, because you're going to talk to some of the people, a little further down the food chain. You're not going to get anywhere.
Exactly. And, there's one thing that was written, I can read just a very short sentence. It was from the National Preservation Act of 1966. And the reason that it was created, and it was to transform the federal government from an agent of indifference, frequently responsible for needless loss of historic resources, to a facilitator, an agent of thoughtful change, and a responsible steward for future generations. That's, what the, people in Washington are all about, the National Register. And we're lucky to have them, because a lot of stuff would have been lost, because there's a lot of building, a lot of construction, and, a lot of people just want to mow something down. And, if you do that, we're just going to be nothing but I believe in if you're old enough, you might remember people used to refer to East Germany as the Eastern Bloc. The reason why we refer to it as the Eastern Bloc because they built everything in squares. Everything was a square block. All the apartments were square. Everything was square because that was the easiest way to construct something. And that's what we're looking at. Like, I mean, we're looking like stucco land Starbucks with a little crown molding on top, stuccoed over, and that's our new
that's the way they're building apartments now too. If you ever look at any of these apartment complexes, they look like the people that went to architecture school to design them, were given a bunch of Legos and said, "Make me an apartment building." I mean, that's what they look like.
It looks like beehives from the Eastern Bloc in East Germany. The ugly gray, and there's a social order to it. That is just not attractive. That's not how cities are built. Cities are built, outwards, and they have character and charm, and they just want to mow it down and make everything geometric. Right. Which is really,
I mean, you can
get as much square footage.
Yeah, if you go down to downtown Los Angeles, and you can see some of the older buildings that are down there, and they have nice. I mean, they might not be in the nicest part of town, but you can see the architecture that went into the front of them. There was a nice facade to them with carvings and inlays and maybe a couple of statues or something stuck in there someplace, and it had a personality to it. The buildings actually look nice. And you go 5 blocks past, down where the Skid Row and everything is, where they're trying to build all these new condominium complexes and everything, and that's what they look like. They look like Legos. Somebody stacked a bunch of giant Legos together.
Modern architecture, the architects want to stand out, and they don't care if it's not user-friendly. In fact, I know somebody who just graduated architectural school, and they designed a boathouse, up in Minnesota for one of their class projects. Everybody was doing this boathouse, and he saw a covered bridge that was nearby and kind of gave it that style. And what the teachers hated it. It was beautiful, but they hated it, and they said, "Why do you not like it?" And they said, "Well, it's people-friendly." They actually said that.
Really?
Yeah, because it has shade, it has a place for people to stand. They just want this stark, ugly stuff because, it stands out like a sore thumb and people are looking at their building. And, it's pretty sad, the state of architecture in this country.
Well, it's that just doesn't infect architecture. It infects a lot of things, and it really is part of an agenda if you get further and further into it the way me and Wendy have, and looking at it, making things ugly is actually has a very profound psychological. Well, it's not just Agenda 21, but it has it is part of it, but it's not just part of it.
Sure.
It does have a very profound psychological effect on people, and you can see it with modern art, which I swear to God, I've seen it and I don't get it. Somebody takes a canvas and paints a line across it and says, "This is beautiful," and then you have some art critic coming in who was with his bohemian, whatever, and trying to describe this to you and make you understand why this is significant. And it's like, dude, it's a canvas with a line across it. All right, it means nothing. It's completely insignificant, stupid, and some idiot is going to pay $1 million for it. I kept thinking to myself, I should make modern art because all they got to do is splatter some paint on something or paint a straight line, and I can make a ton of money. And that's what these apartment buildings are. And it's designed this way. They're trying to make people think that ugly stuff is actually beautiful, which is how I explain pop music too. It's terrible music, and yet everybody thinks it's great.
Yeah, but, and the buildings have no shade for people. They have concrete on the ground, so it reflects against the side of the wall, so it heats it up. So it just forces you away. I mean, it's like a lot of businesses are that way now with the music they're playing to drive people away. Come in and buy something and get the heck out of here.
Yeah, that elevator stuff has been around forever, but yeah, I mean, again, it's a whole big thing about creating stuff that is just so bland. And again, you take it back to the Eastern Bloc countries when the Soviet Union was running that part of Europe. It's like, yeah, I've seen when I was 14, I was in Germany, and I went to Berlin, and all those old buildings that you saw in a lot of the old films, even the old propaganda films that actually had some very nice architecture, a lot of those were gone because the Russians came in and flattened out that part of the country, and they built up these Lego buildings in its place. And now this is back in 1980, and I think they hired some of the architectural designers and came here and started teaching architecture to these new people, because it's like, yeah, I remember all this stuff from like Eastern Germany,
Well, I as a kid, I mean, everything, I remember was the colors were bright and they were, lighthearted and, had a joyous feel to it. I mean, now every other car you see on the road is silver, white, or black. It's like, it's like we're the Eastern Bloc countries. Everything, any color you want, as long as it's grayish.
Yeah, and they're all starting to look like those cars too, with the Prius, which is one of them.
Oh,
and they're all starting to look like those little goofball cars that they were given to drive around. Just here, it's got four wheels and an engine. Go.
Yeah, and I was just talking to somebody the other day, and we were just talking, whatever happened to a monorail idea? I mean, they want to build, a subway for $25 billion that will cost $100 billion by the time they're done 30 years from now to go 10 miles. I go, you could connect all of California up with that. I mean, Southern California with a monorail system that, go to your local mall, hop in it, and go to Olvera Street and have margaritas and come home in 8 minutes. It's like,
you can do that now with the red. You can do that now. Well, I could do that with the Red Line. I used to go down to downtown on the Red Line all the time from the San Fernando Valley. But most of the money that should be used for decent infrastructure in California is going to Jerry Brown's toy train set. That's not ever going to happen.
Well, I can't tell you what happened. It was during I believe it was Bradley was the mayor. The Swiss came in and said they want to put a monorail in Los Angeles and then connect it up with other parts of probably Orange County. But they will put a monorail in Los Angeles, and all they asked for was 7 years of, like, if you got off and wanted to buy a newspaper or a soft drink or a cup of coffee. And, of course, Mayor Tom Bradley and his people turned it down, but they took tremendous payoffs and bribes from the car companies, and that's why the monorail was never built, and the Swiss wanted to come in and do it for free. So to be honest, to go underground for all the miles that they've done is just absolutely preposterous.
Right.
I do think what Long Beach put a blue line in, or right, that you could the electric, right, it's above ground.
Yeah, but the problem with that is, first of all, I mean, you go through ghetto on the way to LA, and the number of homeless that are living on the train now. You look at the seat before you sit in it, because you could sit in something you don't want to sit in. Like I was just talking to somebody the other day, and that's what happened to them. And
wow.
It's I mean, it's not a safe place to be, to tell the truth. But and also, it's 100 tons of steel to move 70 people. I mean, a graphite monorail is lightweight. It's above traffic, not competing with cars. It could go into the second, third floor buildings. You could literally, maybe one day, you could actually live in Bakersfield and commute to Orange County. I mean, because you're there in an hour and a half, and it would just change everything. Mm-hmm.
I agree, Peter. They should have went from San Diego all the way to Bakersfield, but basically the corruption in California has been there a long time, and they ruined it. But also, too, guys, the movie Roger Rabbit was based on the red cars, because the red cars went from Long Beach to Los Angeles, and of course Bob wrote them, and go to Pacific Park. It was incredible. They they had the red car lines. Right. And the car companies came in and got rid of the red cars. I mean, any type of logical and possible technology, let's face it, the politicians and corporations, the corruption was beyond words.
Well, yeah, but here's another prime example of the bureaucracy that I've been talking about. In San Fernando Valley, there was a train track that went from one end of the valley to the other. North Hollywood all the way over to Chatsworth.
That's right.
So about 10 years ago, so they tore it all up, laid down concrete, and put a bus line on there. It's called the Orange
which
Line.
we did not vote for. Right, go ahead.
No,
yeah,
but they put it on there anyway. The cost of about $350 million. That was the initial budget. I'm pretty sure it cost a lot more than that. So now they have the Orange Line buses that run from one side to the other. Now they're talking about getting rid of them because these are buses and they didn't want buses. They're talking about tearing up all the concrete, laying down railroad tracks, and putting a train on it. Instead,
right. It's criminal. It's just criminal what they've done, Nick. I agree.
Yeah, and then I'm pretty sure they would do that, and then a few years later they would say, "Well, we were better off with the buses," and they put the buses back in again.
I know.
That's just kind of the way they do it when they want to spend $100 million or more. They just find a way to spend it, and it's really stupid. And we, as taxpayers, end up paying for it. And then you come up on something where, and it's taxpayer money that we don't want to spend on something like that. We're perfectly fine without it. But then you come up.
The problem with the subways
are
the problems with the subways are, they're only going from from downtown LA to Westwood. Really, how many people are taking that line? And it's going to cost $20 billion, and you're going to have to go through methane gas pockets and underground rivers, and dodge all the columns from all the giant skyscrapers and terrorists and earthquake country. And it's the stupidest thing to pour money into that I've ever heard of. And I talked to a guy who actually builds monorails in other countries, and he said it'll never happen here. I said, why? And he said, well, let's say you want to go from Redlands to LA. That'd be a great line. He goes, you have to get permission from every city. He says, that'll never happen. You can get permission from, 60 cities, and one says no, the whole thing's a kibosh.
Right.
But the old red line, over in Lakewood, there's an old station that they've rehabbed, and they've got a map of where it used to go. I didn't know it used to go to Redlands. I think they said it was like 1,100 miles of track.
Yeah. It's ridiculous. It's criminal, absolute criminal what they did to the red line. Absolutely.
But
California doesn't. We don't have rapid transit. That's why the freeways are bogged down. That's what today, Peter, it was about 112, 115 in the valley. Where? How about was it by you?
It was about 103 here.
Well,
right, yeah.
Yeah, it was.
But think about it like this. Think about look at what we've been just discussing. Look at all the tax money and all this wasteful money that's being spent on, subways and roads and God knows what other multi-gazillion dollar projects that these politicians would love to keep spending money on because it makes them look good in their community, and we're giving people jobs, and it doesn't matter if it's going to cost us. It doesn't matter that it's going to cost your grandchildren money and whatever. 40 years down the line, they're still going to be paying this off. But then you get a project like this mural, and you have volunteers coming in to take care of it, and it gets shot down. You have to go through this massive amount of paperwork and headache to get it done when people want to volunteer, where it doesn't cost the taxpayers any money.
Yes. Yeah, and it's a community thing, and it unites the community. That mural brings people together, and I think I mentioned to you before, one of the most important things about it is that nobody's face is on it. And thank God for that, because it's what the Constitution means to you personally, on a personal level. You don't have to look at some other hero that's up there. You don't have to look at somebody else's face. You're not looking at a picture of a battlefield or somebody holding a gun. It's what the Constitution means to you, and that is a very, very powerful statement. I mean, we've had teachers tell us that, kids don't know the difference between the Revolutionary War and the Civil War. And
they don't even know about the Revolutionary or the Civil War, Peter.
Didn't George Washington defeat the South in the Civil War?
There you go. What they went? Wasn't it a couple of years ago? They went around asking people why we celebrate the 4th of July. They couldn't tell people.
Yeah, they couldn't. They didn't know.
They didn't know.
That's a pretty sad state of affairs right there, too.
Of course it is. Yeah, absolutely. It's a tragedy.
Yeah, it shouldn't really be called Independence Day. It should be called Declaration Day, because that's when our independence was declared. It took several years later, after the Battle of Yorktown, before we actually were physically independent from Great Britain.
And then that history is fading for a lot of people, and that's what I love about that mural is that it makes people think. And I mean, what's really amazing is new immigrants love that mural, loved it. I mean, that you should see we have 15,000 comments from the people who signed the petitions, and I mean, it was the first day they were in this country and they saw it, and it made an impact on their lives because they have nothing like that. When they see that, it's like, wow, I want to be part of this. And
you know what I'm thinking?
Beautiful.
I'm thinking if you could find a way to tap some tax money that to get this done and hire some crooked contractors, that wouldn't even be a problem. You wouldn't even be going through any of this. Because they would kick back some politician, and they would kick back some locals, and that say it would cost $1 million to redo the entire thing. That could balloon up to $5 million, and somebody could look good because they got their mural done, regardless of how much money it's costing you. And that they could make that happen as a routine maintenance thing every year, so that could balloon up to $10 million. So, watch that snowball effect.
You become part of the bureaucracy?
Yes, exactly. Once you become part of the bureaucracy, man, they would jump on that in a heartbeat. You wouldn't have to be going through any of this.
Yeah. Very few people are aware that the reason that the U.S. Constitution came about was navigation along the Potomac River and various tributaries that connected with it. So here we have a river, the Santa Ana River. Three cities take their names from it: Riverside, Anaheim, which means home of the Santa Ana River, and then the city of Santa Ana. And there is also another significance which is completely overlooked, and that is the river itself. Yeah.
No, there's so much to it, because it's just to understand who owns it, because there's riparian rights, there's the different counties' rights, there's the cities' rights. It's a very complicated issue, and there's a lot too. When the bicentennial went on, there was a park inaugurated. The city of Corona became a bicentennial city, signed by John Warner, and there's all this incredible history that the library there is now going to be revisiting. And there's an old line: wounds leave scars. That's why good deeds need monuments. And we need monuments like this, because I defy anybody to tell me a greater monument known to the public to our Constitution in all of the Western states. That's it. I mean, with 300,000 cars a day passing by it, we're talking about ripping down our Statue of Liberty. Everyone talks about how nasty sometimes East Coast can be in New York and their attitude, but you know what? They never would have let them tear down their Statue of Liberty when the inside was rotted out, and said, hey, well, let's put something up fresh. But that's kind of like what they're saying here. Let's just tear it down and put up something fresh. Let's blast Mount Rushmore off and put up some new faces. It's like, no, this is part of our community.
I'm sure that conversation has taken place with
right.
the new face that was going to go up there and was going to be Barack Obama's.
Oh my God.
Which would have been disastrous.
I know.
Yeah,
because the Muslim religion doesn't celebrate 1776. Oh, there you go.
They're not at 1776 yet. They're still in the 1400s, I think.
There you go.
Hey, you know what we found out? Maybe a lot of you don't know this. Australia has the same bicentennial as the United States, because it was founded in 1776.
Huh.
And
no, I didn't know that.
And so in 1976 they had their bicentennial too. We've gotten a lot of emails from Australia, saying to keep the mural. We have nothing like that here, and they really think it's pretty fantastic. It's amazing when other people from other countries comment about something you have in your backyard and you've just neglected, and you're going, wow.
Right.
It makes you really feel sad about not standing up for your own backyard.
Well, part of that came about because Great Britain could no longer send its penal people and prisoners over to the States, so they sent them to Australia instead from that point on.
Yeah, that's a great history. Hey, our whole entire country was founded by a bunch of criminals. Yeah, our country was founded. Our country was founded by a bunch of freedom fighters and statesmen, and we became criminals.
There you go.
From the crown.
Like what was it? What Franklin said: we hang together or we hang separately.
Yep.
Right.
So, he also said another one when he was asked a question. What after the Constitutional Convention? What have you given us? And he said, a republic, if you can keep it.
If you can keep it.
Mm-hmm.
It was Benjamin Franklin and Thomas Jefferson who walked out of Independence Hall, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
Said that.
And then Mrs. Powell came up and asked him the question, and she was actually pretty influential in politics, which, if you look at her history, it's pretty interesting, too.
Hey, Peter, you got a website you can give out to the people?
Peter? Pardon me?
Can you give out a website?
Oh, yes. It is friendsofthePradoDamMural.com. But all you have to do is say Prado Dam Mural on any internet search, and it'll take you right there.
All right.
Okay, great.
All right, everybody. We'll see you next week.
Thank you, Peter, for the update. We appreciate it. We'll keep the people informed. And next week is Deborah Tavares. Thank you. And Peter, thank you for the mural, and thank you for your time and help. This is great, and God bless you.
Thanks for getting the message out. You have a great evening.
All right, you have a good one.